that man-to-man marking is about sticking really close to someone. Charlotte has got to stick close. When I shout stop, both people must stop running.
Close marking is an essential technique in sport, and one-to-one work is also a valuable professional development tool.
I think as a teacher you're expected to have all the answers all of the time, and you almost convince yourself you know everything because you have to in front of the children a lot of the time. And it's actually really nice to be able to go somewhere or to somebody and say I need help and tell me some answers. And I find that makes a refreshing change.
Caroline Blakey has been teaching physical education at Ashton-on-Mersey Secondary School in Manchester for the last 4 years. Over this time, she's been involved in the school's coaching and mentoring programme.
Ladies, you are doing a great job.
When you start out in a teaching career, you don't really think past getting through your NQT year. You don't aspire to be a head teacher or aspire to be a head of faculty. And I think the fact that the CPD programme is so vast and there are so many different opportunities opens your eyes very, very quickly. And you can see that if you're enthusiastic and you work hard, you can develop very, very quickly. I do think you need to have a certain inner drive to want to achieve yourself, to benefit from them. But without the structure there and without the opportunities, I would just be turning up and doing my day-to-day job.
As part of the school's coaching cycle, Caroline has turned to experienced coach Aidan Maloney for some help.
I think it's a very difficult role to embark on because you have to have a lot of confidence in your own understanding of what is good, and it's sometimes difficult to put that information onto somebody else who's not as experienced as yourself. But it's a very pivotal role and a very worthwhile role in that you can actually see the development that takes place in lots of other people. Okay, thanks for your lesson plan, Caroline. It's really detailed and really thorough as expected. You just take me through how you're going to ensure that the pupil learning is the focus of your lesson.
It's a low ability Year 7 group and they don't respond to lots of instructions or lots of information in one go. So we've had an introductory lesson to defending previously and I'm now honing it to man-to-man marking.
It gave her an opportunity to discuss the key activities that she wanted to get across, and that obviously was a way of me giving her some support and advice prior to the lesson about the way in which the lesson could go, which is a key coaching process. In terms of your session plan, it hasn't identified what challenges that you've got for those children who might be more able within the group. Can you just take me through how you're going to ensure that they're focused and challenged throughout the session?
I've placed extension activities and I'm going to group the children. They're working in groups of 6 in different thirds, and I'll have more able working with more able for this particular lesson and less able working with less able, and I've got extension tasks for the children that need to be moved on. With the focus being on pupil learning, I think what I'll be looking for today in the session is what the children have actually learned, and it'll be really important that you reinforce, I think, throughout the session the learning objectives that you're going to obviously start with. And at the end of the game, it's going to be really important for me to see whether the children can apply the skills that you've taught during the session. I think it's vital to have the prior planning before an observation or a coaching session, because I think anybody can deliver a one-off or singing or dancing lesson for starters, so it can be completely unrelated to anything. And there is a temptation as a teacher when you feel a little bit vulnerable to do that and to put out all the stops. I think the only way you're going to develop professionally is to do what you normally do and to get some honest feedback. So I think what you have to do is you have to set the context. They have to know what you've been doing in the run-up to it, and there has to be an understanding of the objectives and what you're trying to achieve. Because if you're both coming from different viewpoints, then you're never going to agree on anything.
Our learning objective for today, man-to-man marking and apply in small-sided games. By the end of this lesson, I'll know you're successful if you can show me how to man-to-man mark in our small-sided games at the end of the lesson. We're going to do follow my leader. It's very, very simple. Remembering that man-to-man marking is about sticking really close to someone. Lauren is number 1, Charlotte is number 2. Lauren is going to try and move around this area, and she's going to try and get as far away from Charlotte as possible. She's going to pretend she doesn't like her very much, okay? She's going to try changing direction or changing speed. Okay, let's have a quick demo, go.
Just come in a second. It's not as meant as a major criticism. Lots of the children are actually finding some of this defending quite easy. So
right.
I think now what you should be looking to do is make it more challenging for the defenders.
Okay.
How would you do that?
Increase the space so the attackers have got more space, take the cones away. But I am actually going to do it in 2 minutes anyway by putting them into a 3v3 game, and so they take away all the restrictions. They're actually a really underconfident group, so I wanted them to achieve lots of success, and then we'll see if it works in the game after.
That's fine, that's a really good answer.
In addition to Caroline being coached, Aidan is simultaneously involved in a coaching session of his own with the head teacher.
It's ensuring that the standards that I'm expecting of the P faculty are consistent, and it's also rubber stamping the kind of grades and the kind of feedback that I'm going to give my staff, which makes me feel more confident about the whole process. Okay, thanks Caroline for letting myself and Vicky come to see you teach this morning. Can you just take me through the lesson in terms of what you felt went well for you in terms of your teaching today?
I thought that the organisation was fine. I thought that the children moved into groups quite well, and I think with that particular group they need that structure.
There was an activity today where the girls were using 2 cones and they had to lose the marker who was marking in front of them from a ball that was fed. The activity itself was great, and lots of the children, the moment you set it up, were able to achieve the success of the defender.
Okay.
Now, I would have stopped the lesson a little bit quicker than you, personally, and tried to differentiate the task a little bit more. What you might do in the future is perhaps bring the children in after a minute or so of them having a go and get the children then to decide on where the cones would go to ensure that they're challenged themselves. Yeah. So if they find it very, very easy, then they open up the cones to make the task more difficult. If they are finding it more difficult, when they close it, so that everybody can achieve success, and then they're differentiating the task themselves, which would be a good way forward.
The coach has to be sensitive, but I also think that it's a learning experience of the person being coached. I think you have to learn not to take it personally. That if someone makes a criticism of your lesson, first of all, you've got the opportunity to talk it through, but that you're quiet and you let it sink in. Because if you're defensive and you see it as a personal attack, you won't learn anything from it. And I think you just need to be able to say, well, you know, I might not agree with everything, but listen first, discuss it, put your own points across. And I think you have to be given the opportunity to do that if you don't agree. And then learn from it, because it's only going to improve you.
Well done. I think that was a good feedback session, and I thought it was really positive the way you asked Caroline to give you her feedback first, because obviously, you know, she'd picked up on a lot of the areas that you wanted to discuss. I also like the fact that in the actual observation you weren't passive all the way through. You actually obviously spotted something that you wanted to do some coaching with it in the middle of the lesson. Yep. Because I think most people, when they do an observation, are very passive in it and simply see themselves as there to observe and make some notes. And if we're to move this forward and think of it more as a practical coaching session, then it does make much more sense to intervene and discuss things where appropriate with the teacher.
I think it's where appropriate is important.
Yeah.
I think some staff will take that kind of opportunity and see it really positively.
Yes.
Other staff would see it as
Yeah.
me, you know, getting too involved with something I shouldn't be.
The area where I would like to see you develop more, and it's not a criticism, it's a development, is in the same way that you were saying to Caroline, don't be so involved in it, stand back from it. I think we need to resist the temptation maybe to tell the member of staff exactly how we would do it, and give them an opportunity to sort of answer the question. So for example, you talked about the next time I might challenge the pupils more, which I think's fine. Then you went on to tell her how you might challenge them. And I think it might have been more appropriate to have said, so how would you challenge them next time, to give them a chance to think about it.
I think teaching is such a busy profession that you do your job and you just get on with it, but to have someone else's opinion is invaluable. And to have that time out to actually sit with somebody and reflect and focus solely on that is really, really crucial. And I think it's a shame you don't have time in the school day to do more of it, because I think the self-reflection and that peer reflection, whatever you call it, I think it makes you better teachers and better professionals.
Another professional development tool that Caroline's used to help her up the career ladder is mentoring.
People often ask what the difference is between coaching and mentoring, and if I'm honest, I'm not really sure myself. I think it's a very blurred line. Coaching, for me, it's a bit more of a distant relationship, and it's about identifying practical strategies and setting targets for improvement. A mentoring relationship, as far as I'm concerned, is much more about hearts and minds, and it's much more an inspirational relationship and an aspirational relationship where, yes, you might be setting challenges, but it's about getting the people to aspire to set the challenges for themselves and to help them to have time to reflect on that.
Since beginning the Leadership Pathways Management Scheme last year, Caroline has been mentored by Assistant Head Richard Middlebrook. Meeting every half-term, Caroline's now keen to seek Richard's advice on a new thinking skills project she's recently undertaken.
I help her develop as a leader and see what she's learnt since our last meeting, and focus on, if you like, a whole school improvement plan, which was thinking skills. That to me seems the key thing about this whole Leadership Pathways programme. It's all about what you learn and how you change as you go through it. And your whole school initiative is now what?
I'm going to try to think of some ways to implement thinking skills into the curriculum, and what Vicky's asked me to do is go away and think in a bit more detail about how I can get it started, really. And what's worrying me a little bit is that people seem to think that I'm a bit of a guru with it.
You are the thinking guru.
Because I'm only a step ahead of what everybody else is,
Yeah,
and I've only literally done a little bit more research and been on half a day's extra course. And it's fine, I can think of ideas, but I don't have enough knowledge yet either to know how to make all the decisions. I think at first it can be quite threatening, because I think you are going for help and you do want some advice, and if you're not, you don't want to portray yourself as weak or not knowing anything. But at the same time, if you're not honest and you pretend you do know everything, then you're not going to get anything out of it. So it's finding the right balance of knowing enough to be able to get value out of it without worrying about not knowing enough and feeling stupid. I think possibly what we need to do is, in something like the Behaviour Forum, which is already set up, I think there are some key thinking tools which we could use straight away, which I could teach 2 or 3 of them to some key people. And we could pilot them and we could try it and we could see how that works straight away. And maybe it's enough, I don't know if is it just enough just to do the Behaviour Forum this up to the summer?
I think because it's so high profile, and to make sure people are ready for it, I think we need to think of another outlet, another way to get the snowball going.
Okay.
You mentioned, or someone mentioned, setting up some sort of like teaching for learning group or teaching for learning forum, which would operate in the same way as the Behaviour Forum.
It's really useful having a mentor, because I sometimes find it difficult to find a definite path to move forwards. So what he allows me to do is use him as a sounding board to get some advice. And he will give me some answers as well sometimes. I think that's really important, because you don't just want someone to say, well, what do you think? I actually want to learn from somebody else, and I actually want someone with a bit more experience saying to me, well, from experience, I would do it this way or I would do it that way. I know it's important to learn for yourself, it's also important to learn from other people. So for now, maybe I think I'm constantly trying to look too far ahead and try
yeah,
to think
don't
what
give
I need
yourself
to do.
too much work on that. See how it goes down, because I don't know how it's going to go down with staff, do we?
And if I just focus on, if I arrange a meeting with Dave Law et al. about putting it into the Behaviour Forum,
yes,
and then set up when the Behaviour Forum is going to happen, and go through sort of 3 or 4 key thinking tools with the staff there and ask them just to try them before the next session and feedback on them. And that will do for now. I found the mentoring session particularly useful because at the beginning of the mentoring session, when I went in, I had files and files of paper and lots of information and lots of ideas, but without actually having anything concrete at all. And I wasn't sure the best way to try and move forwards with things. But by the time we finished the meeting, although I've still got lots of ideas, we managed to extract a couple of things which I could start actioning straight away. So I walked out of the meeting quite positive and ready to have a meeting with other people on the back of the mentoring session. Thanks for coming today. I just want to talk to you a little bit about thinking skills, which I'm sure you've heard Vicky talking about.
Teaching can be quite an isolated job in many respects. You're in your classroom, you're with the children, and that's it. What our programme does is take the teacher out of that situation and give them somebody else to talk to about the practice. And if you're examining your practice and reflecting on it, you can only improve.